Welcome to Heaping Spoonful, a twice-monthly conversation with restaurateurs, chefs, growers, and others who have helped generate the legends associated with eateries across the Mid-South. The team at Benny Keith is proud to sponsor this adventure with the goal of preserving the stories that have helped cultivate an amazing food scene across the Mid-South. So kick back and enjoy a Heaping Spoonful.
Greetings to everyone, and welcome to Heaping Spoonful. I'm Kelly Bass, and it's my pleasure, after decades of writing about restaurants for Little Rock newspapers, to be the host of this podcast and just talk about restaurants and the people who make them great. Our goal is to cast a spotlight on chefs and restaurateurs from across the Mid-South, and today we'll be chatting with Paul Holt, the owner of Fordyce restaurant in the similarly named but different spelled Fordyce, Arkansas. And just so you know, since this is audio only, the restaurant is the numeral 4, a hyphen, and then dice, like what you roll in Vegas. The town in South Arkansas, on the other hand, is spelled Fordyce. And it's safe to say there are few restaurants in the world that can claim something as famous as the Fordyce can. The very first line of Rolling Stones guitarist Keith Richards' 564-page autobiography that's titled Life starts this way. Why did we stop at the Fordyce restaurant in Fordyce, Arkansas for lunch on Independence Day weekend? That was 1975, and things for Keith Richards and his bandmate Ron Wood went downhill from there. Paul, let's get that story out of the way right off the bat. Tell us about all of that.
Well, the way I understand it, they played a concert in Memphis on Friday, in the 4th, 1975, and I was at that concert. And after the concert, Keith decided that he and Ron and a couple of their buddies would just drive to Dallas, just kind of get out and be on their own. And they drove from Memphis, and they got to Fordyce, but somewhere up the road, right around Sheridan or something, the police got word that somebody was driving kind of on the wrong side of the road and messing around. And so the police came and found that car, which was a real striking rental car that they had gotten in Memphis. It was green with a yellow top and this really ugly car. And the police came and sat up the road because they had seen the car. They had seen the car at the restaurant, and so they sat up the road and waited. And it was kind of funny in a way because my brother, who owns a business here in Fordyce, he came to eat lunch at that time and saw him and got to meet him. And he had his nephew, his son with him, which is my nephew. And they visited and what have you. And anyway, when they left, they went out and got out on the road again, and the police pulled them over. And anyway, they said that they thought they smelled pot, and Keith was driving, and he said, "Well, you can't arrest us. We're the Rolling Stones." And the policeman said this. He says, "Well, you just get back in your car and roll your ass on down to City Hall." And that's the way it was. Of course, the way it worked, they let Keith and the guys, drive themselves down to the city hall. So if they had anything with them, it went out the window between our restaurant and there. But anyway, it was a happening. My brother was actually here and saw them and dealt with them. The waitress that was here, she went over and you could tell they were definitely not from around here. And she asked them if they were in a band, and they said yeah. And she says, "Well, I just like country music." And they talked to her, and they were real nice. And they took her checkbook, ticket book, and drew pictures on them, and gave her autographs. And dang, if she didn't lose that! I tried to get from her, and she lost it. And but there was a whole lot to the story. I'm not sure exactly how much of it you want me to relate.
Hey, I think it's all interesting. Just keep rolling.
When they took them down to City Hall, there was a leather jacket in the back that was on a hanger. It was hanging on the hook in the back of the car, and it hung out there. And when they took them all into City Hall, well, anyway, when they got in there, people started hearing about them being in there, and they told me it was a couple of thousand people showed up outside the City Hall, and that was kind of a big deal.
Sure.
And, somehow or other, that jacket got misplaced. Now, I'm not sure who did it, but somebody got that jacket. And it was a fine leather jacket that had the logo for that tour on it, which is an eagle with jet engines under each wing. It's just really, really nice. And I've been searching for that jacket. I've offered a reward for it, but I haven't had anybody to come forward and actually admit that how they got it. But I think that the limitation is all over with now, so maybe it would show up.
It's worth a lot of money.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah. When
they arrested him here in town, Keith had a Coke spoon around his neck on a chain, and they confiscated that and a cigarette lighter, and I think he had what it all boiled down to though is he had a knife, which wasn't a big knife or anything, but it was in the trunk of the car, so they got him for possession of an illegal knife, which was really nothing. And it reckless driving, and they wrote him up for that, but all that really stuck was that knife. They had 3 grams of coke in a briefcase in the trunk, but that supposedly belonged to one of the 2 men that were with them that was supposed to be their bodyguards or friends, but, mule. And, but anyway, they they got off of that, and they carried them. The whole thing about them being in the City Hall, they had their attorney who was in the Little Rock, who was just a weird, strange coincidence. He was the attorney for the tour. And
Bill Carter, yeah.
Right. And they called him.
No, Bill, yeah.
And he got on down there real quick and to try to, keep the guys out of trouble. But we had a policeman down there. He was going to throw the book at him. And this all happened on a Saturday. And the judge down there, he likes to play golf on Saturday. And he'd already gone out to the golf course, and he had imbibed a few drinks. And as it all turned out, he was pretty gone. But anyway, they had to call him, bring him in from the golf course to come up to City Hall and deal with all this. And it was pretty funny, but he did an excellent job with them, and the guys were good. They didn't cause any trouble, and it was all really just kind of a social event. Now, in the book, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
In the book, Keith says that they had filled that car up with drugs. They'd taken off the door panels and filled it up, and it was just a rolling drug den. But I can promise you that doesn't make any sense, and it never happened because they took the car down and actually went through it. They had a drug dog, and they searched through all the compartments. They couldn't find anything except for that 3 grams of coke, which was locked in a briefcase in the trunk. They couldn't get to it and throw it out. But who knows what all might have come out of that car going down to City Hall.
That's crazy. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm sure they had a show to play that night, so they probably needed to get on down, and I'm glad the judge handled it. If I'm driving from Memphis to Dallas, I don't go through Fordyce. I guess they wanted the scenic route because they could have easily just gone to Little Rock and took a left and onward they'd have gone, but we wouldn't have this great story.
Let me say this now. The next concert was actually Sunday night. They did.
So they had a dead.
They were in Fordyce until midnight on Saturday. This whole thing started around like 2-ish or 3-ish. I think more like 2. And they stayed and it took that long for them to get through all this meandering around and finally getting a plane. They brought in a charter plane out to our little airport and flew them on to Dallas. But their next concert was actually Sunday night, which was the next night.
Okay. Well, at least they had one day there. So, well, again, as I said earlier, no restaurant can have a story more famous than that. And of course, the Fordyce had been open for 8 years because it opened in 1967. And your mother was the founder of that. Did she have a background in the restaurant business? And if not, how did she come to open a restaurant, or your family come to open a restaurant?
Well, my mother was a teacher. She was a high school teacher for many years. She taught math. And then when I graduated from high school, she went on and taught on the college level. She taught over at Henderson, and then she taught several years over at Monticello at UAM. But back in 67, my mother was a school teacher, and when I was a little child, I was raised by my black mother. I call her Ruby Hamlet.
Sure.
Super nice lady. She raised me from day one, and she cared for me while my mother was at school. So anyway, my mother, her sister passed away, and my mother was crying and grieving over that. And my mama Ruby said, "Come on, Miss Betty, we're going to go out there and open that restaurant." Well, the restaurant was actually built by my father, who was a developer. He bought land and ran roads and built houses. He was a contractor, and he did that in Fordyce, and he probably built about, I'd say, a half of the houses in Fordyce, and he ran 10 miles of streets because he sat down and figured that out. But anyway, my dad helped develop Fordyce. He went off to the war, and when he came back to Fordyce, he kissed the ground at Main Street and told God that if he would do everything he could to help this town. And so anyway, he did all this construction. He built houses, and he tried to help people buy houses. He built them, and he tried to keep men employed to build the houses. But at any rate, he bought this little restaurant uptown that had a fire in the back of it, and he actually picked it up and moved it out here onto the bypass, which was new at that time. And he built this restaurant out of using that basic building, and he added on to it, added a dining room, and then he put a gas station on the side of it, and he built all that up, and he bought it. He built it for a man who kept telling him he was going to open it. But the man turned out he was trying to stall my dad so that he could build another one in another place. So anyway, it sat there for, I don't know, 8 months, a year. And Ruby, she wanted to go out there and open that thing up. And my mother was crying and carrying on. So really it was Ruby that kind of said, "Come on, we're going to go out there and open that restaurant and get your mind off of Reba." That was the lady that died. So anyway, my mother had no background in restaurant except for the fact that she knew how to feed a family. She knew how to cook everything. She was an excellent cook. She could cook everything. And she fed, there was 3 of us boys. So she had to feed
a lot of food,
whatever meals. So, but Ruby was really kind of the driving factor. She was wonderful, and I loved her.
Yeah, she probably could cook a little bit herself.
Ooh, Lord, yes, sir.
Yeah. So how old were you when the restaurant got going?
I was 14, and my first job was at the restaurant. My dad had a guy that was going to run the gas station part, and I was standing there with him at the station, and then my dad and that guy got in the car and drove off, left me standing there. And a car drove up wanting gas, and I didn't know where to put it. I wouldn't have either. I was a very naive 14-year-old boy, and I sure didn't know how to run a credit card. And back in them days, you had duplicate and triplicate tickets and had this. Oh, yeah. I don't know. It was crazy. But anyway, that was my first job. And my brother was really going to be the manager of it. My brother was deaf and he was legally blind, but anyway, he went to school at Arkansas School for the Deaf. But anyway, my dad got him and was able to letting him run the gas station, which was really kind of incredible in its own way. But a lot of people went through here and got gas from my brother. They would remember John Holt.
Right. And so you worked at the restaurant, and I guess your mom did, and while your dad was off building stuff. I see this, that your Fordyce is the oldest, same family-owned, operated restaurant in South Arkansas. When did it become did you ever think when you were 14 it might end up being your job, or did it just, that happen later in life?
Well, I'm not real certain where that statement came from, but it may or may not be true. But I'll
It's on the internet.
I understand. Yeah. I graduated from college in 77, and I took a job in Little Rock at UAMS. That was me kind of leaving town. I worked down here for time. But anyway, I went to Little Rock and worked up there for 2 years at UAMS in the virus lab, which was kind of ironic with all this stuff that's going on now. But I was in the only lab that reported to the CDC and they were doing flu then and other viruses in weird situations, but mainly flu. And so anyway, I worked up there for them for about 3 years, and then I came back to Fordyce and I went to work in my father's building material hardware store. And I worked for him for 14 years. And then I realized that wasn't really getting enough money to raise my two daughters and buy them cars and send them to college and all that stuff. So
sure.
I took a job down at Magnolia, actually a little south of Magnolia in a town called Emerson. I went to work for Ethel Chemical Company, which now is called Albemarle. And
I know it.
I worked down there for them for 8 years. And it was ironic, when I first went down there, I failed their physical, and I had to go to my doctor, and they did a complete physical on me, which I'd never had before. And I found out I had an atrial septal defect, had to have open heart surgery, and I didn't get the job. But I wrote them a letter after I'd recuperated, and I told them I was still interested in the job if they ever had an opening again. And sure enough, they called me back and said, if you don't come down here and try again. So I went down and I got that job, and I worked for them for 8 years. And then for some strange reason, I developed bladder cancer. And so I had to have surgery and talked to my doctor up there in Little Rock, Dr. Logan at Arkansas Urology. Anyway, he said, I said, should I go back down there? And he said, well, what's it worth to you? And I said, well, I'm making good money. So I went back to work. And 6 months later, I went back for my checkup, and the cancer was back. And so I had to have another surgery. And this time he wrote them a letter and said they needed to put me in an area that wasn't quite as open to as much exposure to the chemicals I was working with. And they laid me off.
Wow.
They said they fired me. So it really hurt my feelings because I was dedicated to the company and I really liked my co-workers and what have you. But at any rate, that sent me home, and that was in 2000. Well, my wife was already a waitress at the restaurant for several years. And so the way I had it in my mind is that I would help repair the restaurant and keep on working down at Albemarle. So the Albemarle part of it got cut out. So then suddenly the restaurant was our only way of keeping things going.
Sure.
So,
wow.
We had a small fire over the kitchen up in the vent-a-hood. And so that was in our old building. And so I decided, I was going to repair that and upgrade the building, and we went through everything. And so as it turned out, we saved all the parts of the building, which was the very central part that had to do with Keith Richards and Ron Woods and the bathroom that they swear that they stayed in for 30 minutes doing cocaine and all this stuff. That was all a big lie. But anyway, we replaced the building, and we started that in 2000. And we finished the thing in 2001, and it's a completely brand new, rebuilt building.
Okay.
And so that's when my wife and I took it on as our goal. That's our lifeline to make money. So we've been at since 2001, open for business.
Yep. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break here. I appreciate everybody listening to this episode of Heaping Spoonful with our guest, Paul Holt, owner of Fordyce Restaurant in Fordyce, Arkansas, and truly one of the state's legendary restaurants. Hang on, everybody. We'll be right back.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of Heaping Spoonful. We at Benny Keith Foods enjoy talking about the food scene almost as much as we enjoy providing the top quality ingredients that help restaurateurs and chefs across the Mid-South create their magic. Now let's dive even deeper into the culinary world with your host, Kelly Bass.
Welcome back to Heaping Spoonful. I'm Kelly Bass, and I'm visiting today with Paul Holt of the Fordyce Restaurant in Fordyce, Arkansas. So you had a whole career in a very technical roles before the restaurant became what you needed to do, and thank goodness for the physical that found your heart problem. And obviously you have beaten bladder cancer, because we're here talking about it years and years later. And you told us great stories beyond what happened at the restaurant, but all of what happened with Keith Richards and Ron Wood of the Rolling Stones when they, 45 years ago, when they were there in Fordyce and somebody still got their jacket. So I was reading that Keith Richards, Ron Wood ordered fried chicken, which always a good thing to have in a Southern restaurant. And Keith had a 16-ounce T-bone with brown gravy recommended by a waitress. Are those things still items that you have? I would doubt you have a buffet with a 16-ounce T-bone on it, but I bet fried chicken might be on there.
Yes, we had fried chicken on our Sunday lunch buffet.
Yep.
I did fried chicken and a beef or pork item, and then dressing, and we had. But anyway, that Sunday buffet was very popular. We had a lot of people come for that.
Right. Well, we hope people are listening to this episode of Heaping Spoonful for years and years and all around the world, but we will set the stage that we're recording this at the end of July of 2020. We're in the heart, hopefully the heart. I wish we were going downhill on the COVID-19 pandemic, and that has meant a lot of things for restaurants, but it's really taken your business model and turned it upside down and inside out, because you are a buffet restaurant, which have, even with reopenings, have been allowed to reopen. I don't know that I understand that completely, but that's not my job. So did you guys, I guess, like most, found yourself forced to close down sometime in mid to late March?
Yes, we were closed on March 15th. That was our last day to operate. It was a Sunday. The governor came out. I totally accept his what he's doing. I think he's doing an excellent job. We got to be wearing the masks, and we got to be social distancing. The buffet is just not a good thing right now for social distancing, and plus they've cut the volume inside dining can only be 66% of your whole. Right. And when you take a restaurant and they first limited us to 33%, that wasn't even worth trying to open up for, because you got more outlay than you got any income to cover all that. But even really and truly, restaurants are on such a fine line. You can't limit them and expect the business to make money and continue on, the way it had in the past. But the buffets, I totally understand that. You've got people mingling around, talking. That's the beauty of a buffet, is that it's kind of a social gathering, and
sure,
everybody can kind of speak to one another and pass one another when you come and go at the buffet. And that was our claim to fame. And really, we were kind of one of the last of those down here, especially mom and pop type. Anyway, he was right, and they're right to limit that. And the way the things looks right now, we're supposedly to be able to open in phase 3 of this pandemic, but we're not even getting into phase 2 without having so much relapse and more infections. It's just, I don't know where this thing's going to go. I'm very pessimistic about it right at this time.
Sure. I understand. And we were talking before we started recording that, you know, the way you're set up, you're not really able to convert quickly or easily to becoming a restaurant where you place an order and then you cook it and you put it on a plate and somebody carries it out. I mean, that's just not the way your restaurant's set up. So is there a chance that the Fordyce will not reopen, or does it just all depend on what happens with the pandemic and where you're going to wait till a buffet is legal again? Well,
the way our business is set up, I run the kitchen by myself. I mean, I have a dishwasher, but I mean, as far as the preparation of the food, I prep that. My wife preps the salad bar and the cold items out front. I do all the rest of the food. And we've got our business trimmed down to where there's one in the back and one in the front. And we're still able to run the restaurant and feed 100 people a day,
right,
maybe. But if that thing went to short order and individual items, I wouldn't open it, because that's beyond my abilities. I'll be honest with you. I can go back there and cook and have a pot on every burner and cook all the different things I need to put that buffet together. But as far as individual items and dealing with that, I'm not even going to try to. But yeah,
that's a whole other animal for sure.
Right,
yeah.
Absolutely. And see, we don't have a drive-up window, and we don't have I've got a restaurant friend in town, and he locked his door, but he opened up a window by the front door, and he's serving people out through that window. Walk up, and that was.
Right.
That's real smart, but I don't have that capability. The way my building's built, I've just got solid windows that can't be opened. But,
sure.
Yeah, I tell you, this has really been a difficult time and trying to figure out what we are going to do. But it's real hard to do because we don't know what the future holds, and we don't know how the people are going to react. Please, everybody, wear your mask. Do your social distancing, because I love Razorback football and I like going out to restaurants, and I want to see us get back to where we're not all looking over our shoulder and worrying about if we're going to get a deadly disease.
I know. It's just it's painful, and nothing that I anticipated, nothing like anything I've ever seen. And I tell you, someday, we're going to get back to what we consider normal, and what considered normal in Fordyce, Arkansas is a chance to go to the Fordyce restaurant and eat that buffet. And I understand the way your business model is set up and the way your restaurant's set up. That's the only method that works for you guys that makes sense. And it's going to happen. It's just whether you can hang on and just hunker down till the time comes, because of all the casualties of COVID-19 in the state of Arkansas, and there's been too many deaths of people, and that's every one of those have a story. But I don't want the Fordyce restaurant to be one of the casualties of COVID-19, and I know you don't either. So let's just, as you said, Paul, let's all do what we need to do to get it back. And we will certainly hope that one of these days we're all celebrating the reopening of the Fordyce. So I thank you, Paul, and continued good luck. You're going to be able to reopen one of these days. You have one of the truly legendary restaurants in Arkansas for more reasons than one, and that fabulous story about Keith and Ron driving that crazy-looking car from Memphis to Dallas is part of it. So thanks to everybody out there for listening to this episode of Heaping Spoonful. We put them up every other Tuesday, so check out the ones you've missed. Keep an eye out for new episodes, and goodbye, everybody.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Heaping Spoonful. On behalf of all of us at Benny Keith Foods, Mid-South Division, please know how much we love connecting you with the legends of the culinary scene and their unique stories. I look forward to the next time we can offer you another Heaping Spoonful.